Hi, and welcome back to another lesson. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about a kind of a fine theoretical point that arose as a result of a discussion with some of my subscribers. So the idea or the basic question is, suppose you're given a set of notes that you can annotate using two different chords. Which chord annotation should you use? Let me give you a concrete example. Let's look at these four notes, G, A, C, and E. Now, these four notes correspond to two different chords. One of them is A minor 7. This is A minor 7 in the root form. And really, when I take this G down an octave, I get this set of four notes that I've shown you. But it also corresponds to C major add 6. So you take C major, C, E, and G, and you add the 6th degree of the scale, which is A. And just take the A down an octave, the G down an octave, and this is what you get. So is this an A minor 7, or is this a C major add 6? The answer is, it's actually both. But how do you decide which one to use? The answer is, depending on the context of the progression that you're playing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're playing a 2-5-1 progression in the key of C. Now, if you haven't encountered this, it's probably the most important and widespread progression. I have some videos on this, and I'll probably redo them actually in high resolution at some point. So you can go and watch them. But the idea is that you play the 2nd degree of the C major scale, followed by the 5th, followed by the tonic, which is C. Now, in simple terms, you're playing a D minor to a G to a C. Now I'm going to play this slightly in a slightly more complicated way. For the D, I'm going to play a D minor 7, so D, F, A, and C. For the G, I'm going to play a G dominant 7, so D, F, C, G, and B. And for the C, I'll just play this simple triad, E, G, and C. So now, suppose I actually, instead of playing a C, I want to play a C major add 6. Now, what I really play is D minor 7 to G dominant 7 to C major add 6. When presented with this particular progression, with this actually set of chords, if someone came up to you and played this, you'd immediately say, well, this is a C major add 6. This is not an A minor 7. How would you know this? Well, simply because you know the 2-5-1 progression, and it sounds like the progression, even if you didn't know this, it sounded like this progression resolves to the tonic, to the root of the scale you're in. So this is what gives this final seal of approval. This is what tells you this is not an A minor 7, but rather a C major add 6. Now, of course, in some cases, you might actually say, well, I'd like to play the D minor, followed by a G dominant 7, and followed by an A minor 7. This would be a pretty unusual progression. I mean, maybe not unusual, but definitely less common than the 2-5-1, which ends with a C. And to do this, you would have to indicate somehow to the listener, to the player, that you're actually playing an A minor 7. And you could do this, for example, by playing A for the bass. So you'd play a D minor 7, followed by a G dominant 7, followed by an A minor 7. So the exact same four notes in the right hand, but in this case, you've signified to the listener that, wait, this is not a C, this is not the tonic, but an A minor 7. That's it. So the idea is to infer the particular chord by the surrounding chords and the chord kind of overall progression you're in. Now, you'll still run into cases where you're not sure. And this is okay. You know, some of music is ambiguous, and this is not a bad thing. But in case you wonder, like, given a set of notes, is this chord A or chord B or chord C? Just look at the chords that precede it and maybe follow it. And also take a look at exactly how the notes are arranged, if there is a particular bass note, and basically maybe the bass guitar is giving the bass note and the keyboard player isn't. It could be that the keyboard player is playing this, and the bass player could be either playing an A or a C. And just looking at the piano player, you wouldn't know which of the two it is, but if you factor in the bass player, it becomes apparent. That's it. I hope you've learned something new and interesting, and I'll see you next time.